What up friends, I'm James, your host, and today I'm going to be reviewing the new My Disco album, Environment. This is the newest album by the eclectic post-punk band, and it serves as a bit of a counter to their last album, Severe. That one in particular was a very dark, unsettling, and hard-hitting listen, and I really enjoyed that album a lot. It was probably one of my favorite albums of 2016, actually. Instead, on this newest album, the band kind of strips back their approach a bit. This one is much more natural and worldly. If Severe was man-made, this album is pretty much just nature in its full effect. However, in doing so, they lost a lot of what made Severe special, I find. And in doing a more natural and ambient album, they kind of stripped away how they played with space and their dark, unsettling undertones that made Severe so unique, and a lot of the songs here just kind of drift aimlessly without any sort of worthwhile payoff. The repetition on this thing instead feels more lackluster and boring instead of eerie and thrilling, but let's see why that is. The album actually starts off promisingly enough with intimate conflict. This one has a very dark and ominous vibe while utilizing the more natural sounds that kind of pervade the rest of the record. The heavily distorted vocals really match the ambient feedback and industrial instrumentation, if you will. However, immediately you can see that the song just never really goes anywhere outside of its first impression, and this is a problem with quite a lot of the songs on this album. Many of the tracks just don't have enough going for them that make them worthwhile. Ones that heavily focus on the nature recordings and natural instrumentation, they just kind of end up feeling aimless and boring. This is especially true on songs like Exercise and Sacrifice, Equatorial, Rainforests of Sumatra, and No Permanance. For me personally, the biggest problem on this record is that compared to the heavy industrial instrumentation of Severe, the lighter and ambient sounds on Environment just don't do enough to grab and retain your attention. Instead, the songs just kind of end up drifting subconsciously into the background, which is not usually what you want your songs to do. However, this is less of a problem on the tracks with vocals, like in Intimate Conflict, as I mentioned previously, Act, and Rival Color as well. They all, with the vocals, add an element that kind of breaks up the monotony a bit. And Hong Kong 1987 is kind of a middle ground between these two. It's definitely the most interesting out of all the instrumental tracks on this album. The simple and heavy-hitting metallic beat combined with the just guitar that's droning on in the background make for a pretty interesting sound. And this one in particular also doesn't dwell on one element like the tracks with vocals do. It's kind of a sort of balance between the instrumental side and the side where they just kind of focus on one element. They mesh it together pretty nicely on this one. Forever is the ending track, and definitely my favorite song on the record. It's definitely the one that leaves the most impressions, at least the best impression on you. I like how the very natural rain and thunder sounds are paired with a very deep beat on both bongos and traditional drums, and the vocals are also the most fleshed out on this track. The song concept as a whole also feels the most complete and realized one on here, and I also really love the guitar solo that just kind of comes in around the halfway mark. It's honestly pretty chilling and is kind of the defining point in this entire experience, to be honest. This is kind of how I wanted the entire album to be. It's a nice blend of the natural and industrial sounds, and I wish the other songs on the album were as fully realized and fleshed out as this one. All in all, I'm pretty torn on this album. I really do get what they were going for, and it is pretty admirable to try to make something come out of all these nature recordings and things like that. But the execution just pales in comparison to Severe, and I feel the marriage of the natural and industrial instrumentation is just more disjointed than anything on a lot of these tracks. There are a few highlights like the vocal tracks and Forever especially, but it just feels like a bunch of ideas with little cohesion. Perhaps if the album sounded more like an experience with unified instrumentation throughout it, it would have worked. But each song just kind of sounds like a different approach, and nothing just strings them together and nothing unifies them or anything like that. So at the end of the day, I am feeling a decent 5 on this one. It just doesn't really do much for me, unfortunately. Of course, we do have to talk about the album cover on this show, and I actually really like this album cover. It's very simple, very clean, kind of like their last album as well. This one in particular, it has that metallic texture, but the very rounded curves make you think of something natural, and it really represents what this album is about. It's the kind of balance between industrial and natural elements combining together. So I think they did a good job in kind of conveying the essence of the album with the album cover. But that is my review of My Disco Environment. What did you think about this album? Did you not listen to it? They're kind of small, so I'd understand it, but you should give it a try anyway, especially Severe, because that album's amazing. But that being said, that was my review, and until the next one, I'll see you then. Farewell.